time is now about midnight. You remember last episode the fellows were down near the hospital here? Stephen and Vincent Lynch broke off from the group and headed north toward Nighttown. They're aiming towards the brothel of Bella Cohen up here at 82 Tyrone Street Lower, now Railway Street. And pursuing Stephen and Lynch is Bloom, of course. In 1904, it was one of the worst slums in Europe, and I wish I had taken photos when I visited in 2018 of what it looks like now. It was quite in the process of gentrifying, and if you look on Google Street View, unfortunately, a lot of those images seem like they're from like 2009, 2014. Maybe they've updated a bit, but you can't really see the change that was in the process when I was there. It looked like some condos were being built, and they had some, like some fencing, wooden fencing around the construction site, and there were actually illustrations depicting what the incidents that we're going to see in Circe. That was very amusing. The first sentence in my edition has a typo. Your edition may have it as well. The Mabbott Street entrance of Nighttown, before which stretches an uncobbled tram siding set with skeleton tracks, red and green will-o-wisps, and danger signals. It should be tram siding, not trans siding. Tram siding is just those railway tracks that kind of veer off from the main tracks for, letting trains pass and so on. If you're expecting a lot of sexy glamour in this episode, you are going to be disappointed. Joyce is emphasizing the filthy, scrounging nature of this district. The first page is incidental, just Joyce setting the atmosphere. There's prostitutes, he calls them the culls. These are just women that are trying to get work as prostitutes. They're just calling to men. There are children out in the streets. There's a babbling idiot. And then we have Sissy Caffrey from Nausicaa. Remember her, one of Gurney McDowell's friends. She's out there for the night for whatever reason, and she's with two privates soldiers from the British Army. Their names are Private Carr and Private Compton. They're going to be trouble for Stephen later in the episode. But for now, they're just calling Stephen a parson because he's dressed as all black, from mourning. Lynch and Stephen are on the scene, and they walk along talking in Latin, and this may be reminding you of A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, but when they finally start talking in English, they're discussing art, and Stephen says, "So that gesture, not music, not odor, would be a universal language, the gift of tongues, rendering visible not the lay sense, but the first entelechy, the structural rhythm." If I understand what he's talking about, he's discussing how art is trying to convey the original artist's impression of an emotion or experience, and that like the form that it takes, be it writing or painting or sculpture or whatever, that is just an approximation. It's really not the language that art is really aspiring to, and it's trying to get more and more closer to that actual experience. Maybe the ultimate art form is dreams. Dreams, if we can ever transmit dreams, would be the ultimate way of downloading the experience of something. And it seems that art is changing, getting us closer to something like dreams, perhaps. They pass more people, Edie Boardman, again from Nausicaa, and also those twin children, Tommy and Jackie Caffrey from the beach. And there's also like a navvy, as Joyce calls him, which is just a manual laborer. Joyce is really just setting the scene, the atmosphere. We have this really great image. The navvy, swaying, presses a forefinger against the wing of his nose and ejects from the farther nostril a long liquid jet of snot. Yum. Then Bloom enters, pursuing the young men. He's gonna get some snacks, and he stops at a butcher and gets some meat. I'm very suspicious about some of this because, I don't know, are butchers really open like at midnight? Maybe they are, perhaps. It seems like a pretty lively neighborhood for this time of night, so who knows. But I think you need to keep in mind that the presence of any characters, be it, the twins from the beach or the butcher, anything that happens is very suspect. Who knows what is actually occurring? But it seems that Bloom gets some meat, and it seems like he's following them. He asks himself, though, why did I run? Like he chased them, It's like he hasn't totally admitted that he's pursuing them. Bloom also seems very awkwardly out of place in Nighttown, like people are heckling him and getting in his way and he has to dodge vehicles. Also notice that we have stream of consciousness with Bloom still, but because of the conventions of plays, he's going to be talking now and speaking his stream of consciousness, which is fairly unnatural thing to do, but just reminds us that a lot of this is happening in his mind. And then suddenly a figure appears, Rudolph. This is Bloom's father. So if there was any doubt that this was not actually happening, this is, I think, the clue, his dead father. So I think Joyce is just throwing us a bone here and saying that, yes, this is not actually happening. His father is going to be kind of berating him, saying, what are you doing in Nighttown? This is not a place for you to be. He also harangues, like goes on about some incidents from Bloom's youth growing up, like things that he did along the way that weren't necessarily copacetic either. You may want to be suspicious of a lot of this backstory we're going to get about Bloom. A lot of the figures who tell it are very critical and not seeing Bloom in the best light. So keep that in mind, that you need to be suspect about some of this stuff. We are never going to know exactly what happened. His mother's going to appear next, and then Molly, and the soap in his back pocket is going to start talking. So we have people that are definitely not there. We have inanimate objects talking. This is a very Alice in Wonderland-y episode. As these fantasies happen, though, there are points that seem to be happening in real life in Nighttown, and that's just going to be mixing along the way. So Gertie McDowell's going to be there. She's going to say, I hate you, I love you. And I think maybe Sissy Caffrey's there. Perhaps Edie Boardman and the twins are there. I don't feel like Gertie McDowell's there, but maybe she is. Who knows? I mean, if her girlfriends are there, maybe she is too. Abad is going to solicit women to Bloom, and Mrs. Breen, remember her, old flame of Bloom's that way back earlier in the book we met. She is going to see Bloom. Perhaps she's there, perhaps she's not, but either way, she's like, what are you doing? I'm going to tell Molly that you're here in this shady part of town. Although, what's Mrs. Breen doing there, for that matter, if she is there? Alf Bergen makes a brief appearance, and then Bloom seems to have lost Stephen and Lynch. And at this point, we learn a little about what occurred at Westland Row Station. Remember, that's where Mulligan and Haynes were going to catch the train back down to Sandy Cove to the Martello Tower. But for whatever reason, and we're never going to know exactly what happened, but it seems some sort of conflict occurred between Stephen and Mulligan and Haynes. Perhaps they tried to give him the slip and get away from him. Who knows? We're never going to know exactly. It's just one of those ambiguous things that we have so much of in the book. But something happened, and instead Lynch and Stephen headed to Nighttown instead. It seemed like they caught a train along the way, and then Bloom pursued them. Bloom says, wild goose chase this. Disorderly houses. Lord knows where they are gone. Drunks cover distance double quick. Nice mix-up. Seen at Westland Row. Then jump in first class with third ticket. Then too far. Train with engine behind. Might have taken me to Malahide or a siding for the night or collision. Second drink does it. Once is a dose. What am I following him for? Still, he's the best of that lot. Some criticism says that Bloom is the one who's had two drinks. He's talking about himself, how he kind of got disoriented on the way. I think he's more referring to Stephen and Lynch, how they've been drinking a lot and how their actions are really hard to follow, and whatever course they're taking doesn't make sense, so he's having trouble following them. But it is ambiguous. A dog has been following Bloom, and he decides to give the meat to the dog. He's always so generous to animals, but in doing so, some policemen see him do that, and they just basically use it as a reason to harass him. They say, what are you doing here? What's going on with this? What are you planting here? Unlawfully watching and abetting is what they try to charge him with. And he tries to get off by saying, oh, I'm Henry Flower, and he gives him the card that says Henry Flower, and then Martha Clifford appears. This is clearly a fantasy element. She is conflated with the Martha character from that opera Ma Paris, And as she accuses Bloom, this really launches into this long trial fantasy in which Bloom is put on trial for all his injustice to women. This woman, Mary Driscoll, accuses Bloom of some kind of sexual harassment back when she was employed as a servant for the Blooms back in the day. And this incites a bunch of other women to make a bunch of accusations against Bloom. They even used the phrase "Me Too." So Bloom is having his "Me Too" moment here, and it reminds me that pretty much everything is in Ulysses that we're encountering today. And just like a lot of modern Me Too moments, it's a very ambiguous, like, who do we believe? J.J. O'Malloy is Bloom's lawyer. He tries to defend him and get him off the hook. But it's really all these people from the past and from the present, everybody that he thought was his friend turns against him. You remember that guy Hines who owes Bloom some money? He tells Bloom that, he says, "You are a perfect stranger." So this turning against Bloom, it reminds me a little of Parnell. It reminds me of Jesus. It's just the tide is turning on Bloom. Bloom eventually snaps out of it. He is talking to this prostitute on the street named Zoe, who tells Bloom that Stephen and Lynch have entered the brothel of Mrs. Cohen, and she's going to tell Bloom something, a very powerful clue that he's going to use later on. She says about Bella Cohen. She's on the job herself tonight with the vet, her tipster, that gives her all the winners and pays for her son in Oxford. So Bella Cohen's son is at Oxford University. Bloom notices this and uses it later on. Zoe is not shy at all. She grabs Bloom's crotch and feels his testicles, and along the way she discovers that petrified magic potato that he keeps with him, and she says, "Oh, cool, a magic potato." This is kind of the opposite of what happens in the Odyssey, where Hermes gives Odysseus moly. Instead, Bloom has his magic artifact taken away. And then she also asks Bloom for a cigarette, and Bloom says, "The mouth can be better engaged than with a cylinder of rank weed." Zoe replies, "Go on, make a stump speech out of it." And on that little initiative alone, this launches into another long fantasy section about Bloom kind of electioneering and kind of like Parnell-like, promising what he's going to do and how he's the savior of Ireland. It's really a total reverse of the earlier section where Bloom was on trial, although there will be some thorns along the way of this fantasy. What I love about both of these is that it really shows the drunken state of mind, how an emotion can be set off like just a word, a little experience can suddenly launch you into a totally different emotion, and you can ride the highest highs or the lowest lows, but it's just the inertia of that chemical process of whatever's going on in the mind. You just ride the wave of it, and it's amazing that both of these experiences can be had so quickly, one after the other. But not everybody loves Bloom in the fantasy. The man in the Macintosh shows up and he says, "Don't you believe a word he says. That man is Leopold Mackintosh, the notorious fire raiser. His real name is Higgins." But Bloom says, "Shoot him, dog of a Christian. So much for Mackintosh." See how easily problems are swept aside with the right state of mind? Even the citizen, that guy who tried to attack Bloom in Cyclops, he is kind of for Bloom in the fantasy. He says, "May the good God bless him." Bloom even steals that Rose of Castile joke that Lenehan told way back in Aeolus. The thing is, though, Bloom wasn't present when Lenehan told that joke. So there's a few possibilities. Perhaps it's just, one of Lenehan's many cliches that he's told hundreds of times. So, of course, Bloom has heard it at some point. Or perhaps this is Joyce showing how anything is possible. Maybe this is the text dreaming, like Nabokov says. More and more people start to turn on Bloom. I think Joyce is showing this is kind of like the madness of crowds, and it really becomes fantastical. Bloom is characterized as the new womanly man. He becomes pregnant, giving birth, and bears 8 male yellow and white children. They appear on a red-carpeted staircase adorned with expensive plants. All the octuplets are handsome, with valuable metallic faces, well-made, respectably dressed and well-conducted, speaking 5 modern languages fluently, and interested in various arts and sciences. Each has his name printed in legible letters on his shirt front. Nazodoro, Goldfinger, Chrysostomus, Mandore, Silver Smile, Silver Selber, Fifargent, Panargyros. They are immediately appointed to positions of high public trust in several different countries as managing directors of banks, traffic managers of railways, chairmen of limited liability companies, vice chairman of hotel syndicates. What? I think Joyce is maybe mocking how when you put people on pedestals, be it Parnell or Jesus or Bloom as he lives out his fantasy, or me as I make such amazing videos, that, legends are going to swirl about, and it's going to become less about the person and more about the madness of the crowd. Returning to something like reality, Bloom accompanies Zoe into the brothel. I'm not clear if he's really aroused by her or if he's just kind of feigning arousal so that she'll lead him where he wants to go. The description of Zoe is less than enchanting. She leads him towards the steps, drawing him by the odor of her armpits, the vice of her painted eyes, the rustle of her slip, in whose sinuous folds lurk the lion reek of all the male brutes that have possessed her. Lion reek is a great name for a perfume, but I think Joyce is emphasizing all the men that have been through this brothel. Footmarks are stamped over it in all senses, heel to hollow, toe to toe, feet locked, a morris of shuffling feet without body phantoms, all in a scrimmage, higgledy-piggledy. Lynch is inside with a prostitute named Kitty Ricketts, a bony pallid whore in navy costume, doe-skin gloves rolled back from a coral wristlet, a chain purse in her hand, sits perched on the edge of the table, swinging her leg and glancing at herself in the gilt mirror over the mantelpiece. Where is Stephen? He is at the pianola. Pianola is a player piano, one of those, with the sheets that plays by itself. But he's playing, and he's just playing empty fifths, which are kind of power chords. For the musicians, empty fifth is, instead of having, a root, a third, and a fifth in a triad, you are taking out the third. So you don't know if it's a major or minor. So is it happy? Is it sad? You don't know. I think Joyce may be saying that we don't know, is Stephen happy in his drunken state or is he sad? There is another prostitute named Florrie Talbot there. Florrie Talbot, a blonde, feeble, goose-fat whore in a tatterdemalion gown of mildewed strawberry, lolls spread-eagle in the sofa corner, her limp forearm pendant over the bolster, listening. A heavy sty droops over her sleepy eyelid. The sty, a sty on her eye, can also be seen as a pun, a sty for pigs. Remember in the Odyssey, the pigs? Stephen is getting philosophical, and then the whores mention, oh, by the way, did you know the end of the world is coming in the summer? And this leads to a fantasy that includes the end of the world as a character, no less. Now, if this were an actual play, how would you show that? How would you indicate that that person is the end of the world? Bloom's father returns to talk to Bloom a while, and if this really is how Bloom's father talked, we can maybe see how Bloom acquired his inquisitive mind. Lots of other people will speak, including Henry Flower, Bloom's alter ego, but then this character comes along, Bella Cohen, the mistress of the brothel, and she is a major character you need to know for this episode. She will initially not talk. Actually, her fan will speak. She's carrying a fan like Carmen, I think it's described from the opera Carmen. And the fan will talk first, kind of berating Bloom, but then Bella Cohen will take over. The fan's just kind of like, a preamble. What follows next is a very interesting scene. There's going to be some gender switching. Bella Cohen is going to become Bello Cohen, becomes very mannish or even a man, and Bloom is going to become that womanly man that he was described as earlier. It's a very sadomasochistic scene. Bloom is going to take a lot of abuse, both verbal abuse, physical abuse, you name it, and it's both comical and tragical. It will also emphasize his willingness to endure any kind of abuse from Molly. Bello, with a hard basilisk stare and a baritone voice. Hound of dishonor! Bloom, infatuated. Empress! Bello, his heavy cheek chops sagging. Adorer of the adulterous rump! Bloom, plaintively. Hugeness! Bello. Dung devourer! Bloom, with sinews semi-flexed. Magnificence! Bloom also claims to have tried on Molly's clothes once when they lived at Hollis Street. Why is Joyce showing us all this? What is going on, both with the trial scene and now with this sadomasochistic scene? I think that he's trying to show the possibilities of one personality, all the things that they contain. Whether Bloom actually did abuse or take advantage of women, or whether he wants to actually take part in these S&M fantasies. Maybe they're just things that happen in his mind. Maybe they did happen to some degree. I don't know, but there are things, processes, and experiences that, at least in his mind, that he has experienced, and they are part of his identity. So where is his personality in all this? Where is a person's personality who has experienced all this? Is this Joyce? Like, is this what Joyce is really like? Really like? Where is the personality? As we experience literature and we have these experiences, like so many ideas are found in Ulysses, where are we in all these ideas? As we, ingest them, they become a part of us, but where are we in them? Where does fiction end and where does reality begin? And I remember McLuhan's idea that media, including literature of course, is an extension of our nervous system, so that when we take in media, we're expanding what we're connected with and what we're experiencing, so that Bloom has these many sides to him. He's a guy who can eat in a restaurant with a friend. He's a guy who can help somebody across the street, but he's also a guy struggling with these sexual frustrations, this anxiety issue with his wife, wondering what's going to happen with his future. All these different parts and parcel of Bloom, they're not just unique to Bloom. We all have these many sides. To compare the various joys we each enjoy, as he puts it, mixing the high and low, the all and everything.